My name is Gavin Evans, and this is my review of Ozark, the entire TV show. In this review, we'll have some spoilers, so if you haven't seen it, go and watch it, then come back and watch my review because I will be going in depth. Now, Ozark is a TV show I've heard nothing but great things about. Everybody kept saying I had to check it out, so I eventually did. And I saw the potential in the first season, but in the second season, I could just tell this was going to be a bland, forgettable show. And by the end, I can say indeed it was. This show was not for me. I do not think this is a very good show in any way. The best part of this show is easily the performances, but everything from a writing standpoint just let the show down time and time again. But let's begin talking about the characters and the performances. First with Marty, who's played incredibly well by Jason Bateman. I love Jason Bateman as an actor. I think he's one of the best comedic actors ever. He just does such a good job of playing the straight man, and I like seeing him in a different kind of genre. I thought he was really good in that 2015 movie, The Gift. He's really great there, and he is great in this show. I do like how smart his character is though. He knows how to do everything so incredibly well. He's very intelligent, and every single word he says sounds very legit. Like, I don't know all the technical aspects of money laundering and the cartel and the FBI, but this show does do a good job of selling you on it. But his character in every other regard I found to be poorly written. He's just a weak character who never stands up for himself. He gets walked all over, he gets pushed around, and I kept waiting for him to take a stand for himself, and that moment never came. Wendy constantly emasculates and belittles him time and time again, and I'm just waiting for a point where this character is going to say, I've had enough, and well, he's just going to get serious all of a sudden, but that moment never came, and that just left me unsatisfied. And then on top of this, the show constantly goes ahead and backtracks with this whole idea of him gaining his humanity, and I do think that's a good idea, but they always backtracked it, so it never had any consistency to it. It had no real progression to it. It was just like a little bit back, little bit back, a little bit back, and you'll just end up in the same place we started in. By the end of the show, he's the exact same person as he was at the start. Then you've also got Wendy Bode, who's played incredibly well by Laura Linney. She is a great actress. She's really good in the movie Primal Fear. She's great in The Squid and the Whale. I thought she was really great in that movie, and she does give an amazing performance in this show. No matter how bad the material she's given to work with is, she constantly elevates it. That said, I do not like how they treat Wendy, because I like the idea of how she becomes more and more of a villain throughout, but once again, they constantly backtrack that and they never want to commit to that. Same thing with Marty's humanity. If they show actually dedicated to each character's growth and Marty became a better and better person as the show progresses and she becomes a worse and worse person, and how that creates conflict and clashing between the two, that would be something very interesting. But the show just does nothing with it. And the show just can't read the room because she is a terrible, evil person and I don't want her to succeed. The show constantly treats her like she's a good person, and that's just not the case. By the end of the show, I think I'm supposed to be happy that they might be getting out of this all, but I'm not, because she has screwed over so many people, she's gotten on my nerves so many times, she ruined Marty's attempt to get out of this in season 2. This character did not deserve a happy ending. She's an evil, vile person, and they should have leaned into that, and unfortunately they did not. Then you've also got the main romance between the two of them, and like I said, it could have been a lot more interesting, but the show just refuses to go there. Instead, the romance is just something that just constantly flatlines. The relationship is just never shown as anything happy or pure. It's always business related, and it's impossible to root for these two characters, especially when Marty gets treated so terribly by Wendy. Like, there's even a section where they're going to therapy and they're bribing the therapist. So, yeah, thank you for that aspect. Then you've got Charlotte Bode, who's played very well by Sophia Hublitz, and I think she does a good job. I think the character is fine enough, but she's never given anything to do. You know, at the end of season 1, Marty gave them a way out, but they're like, no, we're going to stick together. But they backtracked that in season 2, and then she wants to get, emancipated. And then that plot goes nowhere and just gets backtracked again in season 3. So it's just like every other character. They just can't decide on their growth or the progress throughout the show. And it just results in just these very messy written characters. You've also got Jonah, who's played very well by Skylar Gardner. And I do like how he does become a mini version of Marty. How Marty passes his knowledge down onto him of the money laundering. And I like how he eventually uses that against his parents. But I also did find that in the last season, he just got tired of how awful his parents were, of how his mom got Ben murdered, and he was just like, I'm done. So you just have a season of him being done with his parents because they're terrible people, and then it ends with him killing someone. Like, I just thought that was very out of character, so that was terribly written. And then the whole family dynamic, I just wanted more moments where they were actually united and they felt like a proper family and just have some pure moments. Because it always seems like, oh, they're mad about this, they're mad about this. And it would have been a lot more effective if you've got those good moments and then something happens and it starts to break apart in certain ways. But you don't really get that here. Then you've also got the character Ruth Slangmo, played incredibly well by Julia Garner. And I love her personality. She's sassy, she's hardworking, she's smart, and she does come from a tough upbringing in how she wants to overcome the Langmore curse. So there's kind of an underdog element to her, so because of that you do root for her. But that said, I actually did find this character to be very one-note. Despite her being in so much of the show and so much of it revolving around her, if you look at her in the early episodes and who she is at the end of the show, she's pretty much the exact same person. The main thing they try to do with her is to kill off as many family members of hers as they could. And it just, it didn't actually affect the character all too much. The uncle dies at the end of season 1, her dad dies at the end of season 2, Ben dies at the end of season 3, her cousin dies at the halfway mark of season 4. After a while, you're just like, okay, are they going to try to do anything else to make this character interesting? Because the deaths happen, she's sad for a day, and then she moves on. You don't feel the weight of it last throughout any more of the show. And the way they treated this character in the end, I hated. I thought she was one of the characters who deserved to live, who deserved to overcome the Langmore curse, and the fact they didn't give that to her, I thought was an absolute terrible decision. And I did like the fact that Ruth and Marty had a student-mentor relationship. In the first season, you've got the tension of, is Ruth going to kill him? Is she not? What's going to happen there? And I thought that was a good way to keep me on edge. And I do like how they do become closer, and Marty does become sort of a father figure to her. That said, I hate how they don't lean into that enough. Marty always keeps himself at a distance, and I don't like that. It's just not satisfying. It's like if you play The Last of Us and Joe and Ellie don't get close, you just get how the relationship was at the beginning of that game. You want to see some progression there. Like even the last season, the very last episode, Marty goes up to her and he's just like, yeah, you know what, I'm not going to take responsibility. It's your fault my kids don't want to live with me, so you got to get them back for me or I'm going to get you killed. And it's just, you had so much potential here and they just absolutely wasted it. You also got the character Wyatt Langmore, played by Charlie Tahan, who I only knew from Frankenweenie. He voices the main character there, but he does fine enough, but his character is terribly written. He's just a very bland and forgettable character. There's a moment in the last season where the fact that he had a relationship with Charlotte at one point gets brought up. And I'm like, oh yeah, that happened. I just totally forgot about that. And they could have used that in an effective way to create drama, but they don't. And then his relationship with Darlene later on is just really weird. Like, really weird. I don't care about age differences, but that crosses a line for me. And then when he died, I felt nothing. I honestly feel like the show wanted Ruth and Wyatt to be the emotional core of the show, and I just never cared about them. Then you've also got Sri Langmo. Are you trying to think of who that is? Do you not know who I'm talking about? You know, the other one. You know, the guy who gets zero attention at all. That's right, him. Like, if you're going to underwrite a character like him this much, just don't even write him at all. Like in the last season, where Ruth is upset that everybody's dead, you know, they should have been like, well, there's still Sri, and you can try to be a better person for him. But they don't even go that route. It just seems like no one loves him, nobody cares about him, not even the showrunners. Then you've got Ben, who's probably my favorite character on this show, played incredibly well by Tom Pelphrey. He's just phenomenal here. He just adds so much humanity, emotion, and the way they use this character, they did it in a way that creates stakes and tension and proper emotional weight, and I really appreciate that. The fact that you understand that he's acting the way he is and how that affects everyone else, I thought actually gave the show complexity for a short little while. And in season 4, you do feel the weight of his loss. Then you've got Darlene Snell, played by Lisa Emery, and she does a good job, but this is a bland character who does nothing for me. She's nothing more than just a caricature, and that's really it. Then you've got Helen, who's played by Janet McTeer. She's fine, but this character did nothing for me. You've got Navarro, played very well by Felix Solis, and I do like him in the last season. I do like how unpredictable he was and how you didn't know where his loyalties lie. He's telling Harvey one thing, but the board's the other, and you're just like, well, who's he going to trust? I like that. You've got Rachel, who's played by Gardena Spiral, and this is just a character who did nothing for me. The love affair between her and Marty would have been interesting if they did something with it, but they really didn't. She's a very bland and forgettable character that when she comes back in season 4, I'm like, who's this again? Right, yes. Then you got Maya Miller, who's played by Jessica Francis Dukes, and this is just a bland FBI character. And there's some other characters in this show, like Mason and Darlene's husband, but those characters are just very forgettable. I guess there's also Harvey. I liked Harvey, but everyone else very forgettable. And like I said when I was talking about Ruth, every single character death in this show just has zero impact for me. At a certain point, it just becomes very formulaic. And even though I appreciate the fact that they kept the dead characters dead, you never feel the weight of those moments, and it never truly affects the characters moving forward. Maybe you can argue with Ben, but everyone else, not at all. Typically, this is a part where I would talk about the storylines for a little bit, but there's not much to talk about here. Like, I guess there's a whole FBI plot where Marty's trying to turn Maya into an accomplice, and that just did nothing for me. You got this subplot with this baby named Zeke, and I'm gonna be honest, the show probably explained it, but I just forgot, but just everyone obsessing over this baby was just a plot that did nothing for me. Nothing at all. Like, there's one episode where the boards take him in, and I'm just like, oh, okay, this is gonna change things for them, it's gonna change their dynamic, but then they just give them away a little bit, and then they fight in court to get the baby. I'm just like, why is everyone so obsessed with this baby? Why do people care about it? I was never invested in that storyline, and just everything else is just a very one-note story about money laundering. There's just not enough story here. Like, I feel like you could make a 2-hour-long movie with these same characters and story, and you can make it infinitely better. And when you really look at this show, anything you get from this show in season 1, you get from it in season 4. Like, if you look at a show like Breaking Bad, you see in season 1 the way Walt is and how he is at the end. That character has fully transformed and the story has progressed along with him. You take a show like Dark, and you've got the character Jonas and the way that he's changed throughout the show and how he is at the end. You feel the weight of everything he's gone through, and you feel like there's been real progression in the story and the character. You take a show like BoJack Horseman, how he is at the beginning of the show, and how the show is at the end, and how he is at the end. You can tell there was clear progression. I bring up this show all the time, but in one season of Arcane League of Legends, all the characters have changed drastically and they're in a totally different place by the end of one season. This show can't do it in full. And not just that, but each season's made up of 10 episodes and each one is about an hour long. So you've got yourself almost 44 hours, probably closer to 40 hours. And there's just so little story and character growth actually happening. You take these characters and look at how Marty is at the beginning of this show and how he is at the end, and he's the exact same character. You could argue that Wendy's gotten worse, but the show still doesn't want to dedicate it to that. Because in the beginning she was still cheating and she was a bad person, and at the end she was a bad person in a different way. Jonah and Charlotte still kind of feel like the same characters at the end, same as Ruth. Just none of the characters really grow. There's no real progression to the story. It doesn't escalate, and when it does it for very brief moments that have no lasting impact. The show meanders and it just feels utterly aimless in its approach. And in the end, you just got a show that ends up feeling like it exists just for the sake of taking up time. It is a terribly paced show. I found it to be lacking in brutality and real stakes. Like, they always use the cartel as, you gotta do this or they're going to kill you. And there's so many sequences where a character's got a gun to their head and you're just like, well, they're going to find some contrived way out of this, and they always do. It becomes predictable after a certain point and you lose all tension after doing it the second time. So I never actually felt like the main characters were in trouble. They always introduce these supporting characters that you don't care about to die, to have stakes, but they're supporting characters you don't care about. And once again, the show doesn't paint the main characters as villains, they paint them as victims, and that makes it very difficult to get on board with this show morally. There's no real deeper ideas or themes here. I know some people are saying, oh, it's about the cycle and all that, and I don't think that's present here at all. And if it is, they don't go into it nearly enough. The show's not emotional in any way. There is some good performances. Actually, in fact, I'd say the performances are great. There is decent moments. But that's it. There's nothing special about this show, and it ended absolutely terribly. I watched this show, all of it, and I will never watch it again. There's no reason to. So I'm going to go ahead and give the entire series of Ozark a 4 out of 10. Like I said, there's some decent moments, the performances are great, and it is a well-shot show, but just story-wise, character-wise, it did absolutely nothing for me. But have you seen Ozark? What did you think about it? Let me know in the comments down below. Make sure you like, make sure you comment, make sure you subscribe. Stay tuned for some more videos soon, and Gavin out.